Nächste Vortragende erscheint hier schon. Der Titel des Vortrags lautet ESA Support for Defining a Future GEO Amateur Payload. Der Vortrag wird in Englisch gehalten und ich begrüße Frank Zeppenfeldt von der ESA. Herzlich willkommen. Ihr Vortrag.
Mehr gute Nachrichten, diese Beitrag. Peter, auf Englisch, hè? Mag das? Ja? Okay, good. Yeah, thank you very much for the opportunity. Especially Peter, we were in contact in the background, let's say with a number of people. We have sometimes been looking into maybe a possible follow-up on QO100, the geostationary telecom payload with amateur satellite allocations that is now in orbit in the ESA and the X-band. And we have been trying actually to get something going also in ESA. As you probably know, ESA is quite a large organization and takes a bit of time before things move. So what we actually did is to trigger a letter, in this case IARU, the president of IARU, let's say writing to our director in ESA, say do something about this basically. Maybe you can wait for one slide. Oh, sorry, you're waiting for me. Yeah, hey, apologies. Apologies. Yeah. That is, of course. Yeah, dank u. Good. And all this is also triggered because I think some messages were already here in the morning that we think the radio amateur community has been actually very often the first in something. It's not always so known. I find actually that the amateur community should maybe mention that a little bit more also to the commercial industry, because sometimes it's not always a complete good conversation we find between, let's say, ongoing commercial SATCOM industry and what radio amateurs have already achieved previously. And we will be very happy to receive other examples because it helps us in maybe advocating a bit the cause of amateur satellite communications, bringing also new people into this business, which we need desperately actually also to stay competitive in Europe compared to Chinese, US and other initiatives that we see more and more. Good. Now, we will not go into some of these examples, some of them have been mentioned, but it started then that some of us will be quite interested to see at least some follow-up. You might have seen in the slides of the history of Peter, where he just explained that where the initial discussions in QO100 2012, launch end of 2018, let's say these things take time. So maybe it's good to start already to think a little bit what we could do for a future geostationary amateur payload, I would say with a European twist, even more like a European twist. That would be quite nice. So what happened? IARU wrote a letter to ESA. Could you maybe support us in defining some kind of a way forward for a next geostationary amateur payload? Now, I think it's maybe needless to say that this letter has been a bit triggered, let's say. And ESA has asked all the member countries in the program which is called ARTIS, that is the telecommunication program in which I work, and they say it's fine for us, you work on that, you get some budget, but we want to see some focus on let's say European and Canadian radio amateurs, which is also, okay, that's fair to ask, I would say. It's European and Canadian taxpayers' money. Why should not also these radio amateurs get maybe a bit more benefit from that? And there's a few other maybe small print to it, and we also mentioned that it's maybe good to know. And this has been approved last month. We're talking about an initial budget. We can talk the money a bit later. But so now we are here actually reaching out, because for us from the telecommunication part, it's also a bit new to work with amateurs, and it's maybe we need to find a way how to gather requirements and initiate this project. But we can still shape this according to the needs of the amateur community. Good. This is a bit the small print, what was imposed by us, where we would like to work on the needs of European and Canadian radio amateurs, but of course allowing international collaboration. This activity, so that's the budget we have now, and we have now 250,000 euro. That's, I would say, it's up to us how to spend that, really. We are completely open to that. But we come back to what money means in this case, because money does not mean too much maybe in this case. But we'll see how we could accommodate that. And what we're supposed to do is to look at what the amateur community wants. Also, is there a bit of spin-off to commercial satellite? In particular, if we go to higher frequency bands, let's say 77 gigahertz, very interesting also for the EW band that is flying on one of the DLR satellites, but now in GEO. To trade off a few payload options. In particular, also look at the user segment. Let's say if we all start with E-band transmitters or automotive radar derived things, maybe we can do some cheap for the, let's say, radio amateurs, but maybe extremely high cost user equipment is maybe not serving the needs of the amateurs. We have to see that. And we will also basically look into hosting opportunities, meaning we will exploit then also the ESA contacts we have with our regular, let's say, operators and geostationary platform providers. So this is a bit the scope and what we are proposing, and as mentioned, we will be very interested in all kind of input. We are really, it was approved a month ago, we are now shaping the activity, so any input very welcome. We would love to learn a bit on like lessons learned from QO100. We would also, specifically, that's a point of attention, what, let's say, what ESA should not do. It would be a pity if, let's say, if ESA does something and it would, let's say, it would not be in the amateur spirit. That would be not good, with typical ESA reviews, and so that would kill the whole thing. That's not what we want. But we need to learn a little bit there what would be nice follow-up ideas for QO100. Then, and we write here a little bit who we think should be a bit in the lead for doing that. Then we would love, together with a few people, to come up to a few ideas on initial future payloads. And that could be, of course, that's a trade-off in frequency bands. It would be very nice to work on very high frequencies also, but it probably means smaller spot beams, which means less users, it's less inclusive. Sometimes there are people who are a bit more in the, let's say, the Internet of Things, like the people who did LoRa over QO100, so let's say this kind of small messaging, there might be more interest in that. We also think there is a generation of people who, let's say, they have maybe not so knowledge anymore from the analog RF. They start with SDRs and Linux and Docker containers and so, and also that might be interesting. Actually, it would be very nice to have a big fat SDR, GPU, whatever, on board, which is for general amateur use. That could be another direction to go. The other thing which I think we should exploit more is that many of the amateur satellite radio allocations, meaning in ITU sense, are bidirectional. It doesn't matter if we go space to Earth, Earth to space, or space to space also. It would be possibility with a GEO to link other satellites to the GEO, as a bit like an amateur satellite data relay. Geographical coverage is of course an issue, you have to think about that. And then I think we discussed already how attractive is it, also for educational purposes. Another thing which I think, I don't know how it went, but I guess in Q100 there's a kind of, at least somebody takes care that the thing do not become a complete chaos. So there is a level of centralization, and of course the more we go from an analog transponder to something which is, let's say, a flying Linux box, we will need more and more control and organization. Good. That's a bit what we're thinking to do in the coming, let's say, half year. And then we would like to have a discussion. Let's say we have something like 4 or 5 IDs on payloads. We would like to discuss that with the amateur community. We will discuss then with satellite operators also to get a bit of a feel for that. And within that money, I think that funding, it should be possible to put a few things on a test bench. Say, how would this really work? Would people be happy with that, etc. And then I would say we plan at least a bit more detailed for 2 payload options. So I would foresee this to happen in, I would say, next year. You maybe know that just last week there was this World Satellite Business Week where all the commercial satellite operators are always in Paris. Actually, it would be our intention exactly in a year to have there a slot and basically present designs and basically speak again to the whole geostationary opportunity of an operator as an opportunity to say this is something that should be carried, but it should then be pitched. There the financials come in, of course, maybe also as a kind of corporate social responsibility maybe for satellite operators, because we cannot always rely on a sheikh, let's say, that wants this. That's good. This is so far what we think. We do also see problems because we might have now reserved money, but that does not always help to have this money. It needs hours and people and volunteers and so on. But we're still looking then for some maybe people or units, or let's say AMSAT-DL with AMSAT UK, or people who have a bit of, let's say, real experience with satellite building and projects, maybe to pay them a bit and gather the requirements and things like that. We're very open to do that. But we also do understand we are not working like a normal ESA contract. We pay and then in 2 months it should be ready because it's all done in free time. We have to find a balance there. Still, we would be willing to pay somebody whose job it is to gather then requirements from all the volunteers and so on, but needs still a bit of sorting out. We're also considering, let's say, we could support maybe in other ways by paying the travel to people at the next SDR Friedrichshafen event, for example. There was a session and we cover a number of the costs, or we cover a number of cost of the testing and so on. That's a way we have to see. Good. I think that actually that ends a little bit what we wanted to say. We had, with a few people in-house, we had a few IDs on looking at, in particular, this bands, the 77. There is, in Germany also a lot of experience on that. And we had some talks with, there were a few IDs to basically, the 16U or the 12U dispenser was just shown by the DLR colleague. But this dispenser, there's a few people who are thinking of attaching such a dispenser to a GEO satellite. So you have basically, you deploy from a GEO satellite. That's another option. You probably know that quite recently a number of CubeSats are operational in geostationary orbit. So you could almost think that you don't have to reserve only or constrain yourself to a payload on a large GEO, but you could actually have maybe your own small 16U in GEO. But that comes, of course, with additional operational issues, etc. Good. I believe this is it, what we wanted to mention. I'll be here also up till the end of the day. We are not expecting, let's say, immediate IDs. We need to think a bit, but then we're going to reach out again, and we propose to do that via AMSAT-DL and in other countries via other bodies. The last thing I wanted to mention is that over QO100, we will be, I think, making a request to AMSAT-DL because we have recently finalized let's say the new, just standardized 5G protocol stack for satellite that has been officially standardized. So that's maybe the future of DVB-S2. We don't know, depends how the market picks that up. But we would love to see that experimented over QO100. It's a bit like the proposal, the school contacts in Africa. This is of course a bit more higher technological level then. It's a different audience, but it would be fantastic, we would find, if we could broadcast, let's say, the latest technology with open source software to, let's say, maybe technical institutes in Africa, or at least now in the spot beam that is over Q100. We'll approach you separately on that. That's it for me.
Thank you. Oh, 1, 2, 3, jetzt geht's wieder. Ja. Thank you for your very interesting speech.
Thank you.
And amateur with commercials or amateur with ESA, it's very interesting.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. So, ja, nochmal bitte einen Applaus.